It's so hard. There's so many things I could say on all of these topics. I think in the 80s and 90s when we were growing up, the awareness of mental health was pretty much next to nothing.
Yeah.
Or the mental health conditions that we were aware of that were highlighted to us were the standard bipolar disease, schizophrenia, things like that. But when it comes to anxiety, depression, kind of things that impact your mood, there wasn't much kind of advertised into how to cope with those issues. Yeah. And for sure, my parents were not aware of some of the things that were happening to me as a person, or the choices they made in terms of parenting that impacted me as a girl as well. Like, I moved to America when I was 15. So I went from an all-girls private school here in the UK. Kind of my parents just said, we're moving to America. Like, we're going, and you're obviously coming with us. But there was no real discussion as to how that would make me feel. And my dad is a very kind of like deal with it kind of guy. You know, he's just like, you know, sort of man up and deal with it. What are you getting upset about? You know, what's the big deal?
It's that generation, isn't it? It's just, they had to deal with it.
Yeah,
just deal with it.
All the things they dealt with was so much worse.
Yeah.
Which I completely appreciate.
Yeah.
They've, you know, traveled from different countries. My mum got kicked out of Uganda when she came here in the 70s. My dad moved countries on his own, coming to school here when he was like 17, 18 years old with some of his friends. So for them, it was like, well, we've done it. What's the big deal? We're going to do it. But when it came to dealing with the emotional aspect of change, they didn't necessarily have the awareness of how that would impact me. And it's not their fault. There's no blame here. I went from that all-girls private school, loving life, to an American school which was mixed, like no uniform, public school environment. I mean, it was like, I describe it like Clueless, the movie. That's the easiest way to describe it. If you watch that movie, that's exactly the type of school that I went to and the type of environment that I was exposed to. There's so many different types of people. And no one understood me as a person. They didn't even know necessarily where England was. And they associated, in the 1990s they associated being English as being white. So they were like, we don't understand why your skin is brown. But you say you're from England. And then they would make comments like, is it American Indian, like living in a teepee? So things like that really like shocked me. That was obviously not expected.
Yeah.
And managing that was really challenging for me. And I dealt with that through rebellion. That was my thing. I went through my late teens and my 20s in rebellion. My parents went through torture, dealing with a lot of the issues with me going out, like sneaking out the house at night time, like going out drinking with friends, because it was quite a normal thing to do in the US.
Yeah.
Especially when you're 16, 17, house parties would be happening, drinking would be happening at a very early age. And it does happen here, but it's very different. And my parents were quite strict in terms of rules. We've gone to a new country and they were like, no, you kind of need to be home. We don't know who you're going out with.
Yeah. There's
going to be boys there. Like, what? You know, and coming from that all girls school environment where you're hanging out with girls all the time, it's suddenly like, this is a bit risky.
Yeah.
And they weren't super strict in terms of the Asian culture, or they have evolved over time in terms of becoming more open-minded with that, because Asian cultures can be quite strict in terms of going out with boys when you're 16, 17 years old. But at the same time, I didn't feel free. And I felt very different to everybody else. Like, how come everyone else is allowed to go out and enjoy themselves, have house parties and have like 50 people over and just let loose? Yet my curfew was like 10 o'clock at night and I had to be home. So there was a lot of rebellion, and it's taken me a really long time to see why those things happened. And I still I'm kind of working through those processes and that trauma that happened to me in terms of change, and such high expectations to just get on with it. Now, I'm not the type of person who really feels anxious or has any anxiety, because I think I've been so well molded to just manage with change and adapt to new environments and new places that it's really easy for me. It's an absolute breeze. Like moving to the UAE and working in Abu Dhabi and Dubai was just easy. There wasn't, in terms of my mental kind of like ability to change environment and just go to another country and find a job. Like for me, it was adventure. I loved it. So it has kind of given me a lot of resilience in terms of who I am and made me a stronger person. But I think growing up in our generation, it has been really difficult to manage the anxiety and the stress, because we're just not necessarily aware of what those feelings are, and that there is a choice in terms of how we can manage them, or taking that step back, like you said, and saying to yourself, okay, this doesn't feel right, or I'm not happy, or I feel sad, or I feel stressed. Take a step back, look at the bigger picture and try and identify why it's happening, and then taking steps to manage that. I mean, I'm turning 40 this year, and I'm kind of pretty much into the journey of all of the self-discovery and the mindfulness, the meditation. I woke up this morning at 5 o'clock with the best of intentions. I came downstairs, expressed milk, because that's part and parcel of my life now. And then I did reading for nearly an hour and a half, actually. My daughter woke up early, my son woke up early, so I got sidetracked. But she came down, she had her headphones on, was listening to Audible stories, and, we just snuggled on the sofa while I did my reading. We did some meditation together, some breathing exercises, and then I decided that actually the best thing I can do for myself before my podcast today is go out for a run, because it's such a mindful exercise for me. And I love Fridays for that at the moment, because running in the countryside here is just beautiful. And the day, it was just like you said, it's perfection. Like the sun was out,
nice.
And I just felt free to just go out, and I didn't have to worry, because my husband was just dealing with all the parenting and the school runs and the nursery run. So I got my time, and that time for myself is a perfect way for me to kickstart my day in a very positive way. And I have been doing practices like this for many years and not realizing the impact. I've been doing yoga for years. When I was married, but I didn't have kids, and my husband used to watch football, I used to practice 90 minutes of yoga while he watched the football. And I would do that sometimes twice a day.
That's amazing.
Like the joys of not having children in terms of your time.
I always think, what did I do with my time?
What was I doing?